Then on Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview this offseason, and it's going to be over the NC State Wolfpack, one of the top teams in the ACC last season. And this team has got some high expectations going into next season, and rightfully so, as this team is returning some tremendous talent going into next year. But how will this team be in 2022? We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with some notable games from last year, kind of looking back at 2021. And this team was 9-3 last season, beat Clemson 27-21, number 9 team in the country at the time there. They also beat Boston College 33-7 on the road, lost to Miami by 1. That was a tough loss there, potentially one of the toughest of the season, obviously against the Miami team that was a huge disappointment last year. I expected them, like many others, to be a contender in the ACC. Turns out they hardly were at all. So that was a tough loss there for the Wolfpack, but they beat Florida State 20-14 on the road, lost to Wake Forest by 3. That's also a tough loss. I mean, this team took a couple of tough, close losses over the course of the season, and that Wake Forest one against number 12 team in the country obviously was a tough one too, but they did beat North Carolina, which was, at the end of the day, a huge win for this team, 34-30. And North Carolina, what a disappointment for them too. I mean, if you look at the ACC heading into 2021, the big three, the main three teams that people were looking at were Clemson and Miami and North Carolina. It turns out all three of those teams weren't even that good last year, in NC State, Wake Forest, and I mean, those two teams in particular, and especially Pittsburgh, were your big three in the ACC this season. Otherwise, first 6 games, this team was 5-1. Last 6, they were 4-2. Looking at your roster preview going into next season, I mean, this team, there's a reason why they're so hyped up right now going into next season, and I mean, that's because of their amount of returning talent that this team does have. Devin Leary, of course, kind of highlights this offense, and he had a great year last year, put up 3,400 yards, 35 touchdowns, 5 picks, only 5 interceptions over the course of the season for Devin Leary. Definitely a great season for him, nearly 66% completion rate as well. So he's an accurate quarterback. He has tremendously improved over the course of his career too. I mean, he does have some pretty good experience now. Of course, he's played 3 seasons now with the Wolfpack, and I mean, at the start of his career, he was kind of poor, but I mean, as time progressed and 2021 came around, for example, he put up an outstanding season, just a huge breakthrough season for Devin Leary. So this team, I mean, if he plays the same way or continues to improve going into 2022, I mean, Devin Leary, I mean, he's got some tremendous potential for sure, and he could lead this team to an outstanding season in 2022. Zonovan Knight, you're losing him, your top running back last year, 900 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year. Ricky Person, you're also losing him too, and he put up nearly 900 yards and 7 touchdowns. So your backfield does take a couple of big hits there. That's the one main uncertainty, I think, with this team that I do see right now. I mean, of course, if you look at the receiving core, Amezi, you do lose him, so that's going to be a tough loss there. He's had some good experience, and he put up 800 yards last year, 6 touchdowns. So he was the lead receiver on this team by a decent amount. So that's going to be a tough loss there. But otherwise, the receiving core has got some pretty good depth. You got Thayer Thomas coming back, Devin Carter's coming back, same thing with Porter Rooks. So you got your second, third, and fourth receivers all coming back, all of which you contributed to this team for sure last season. So once again, the backfield is the one main concern that I see on this team. I mean, this team does lose 2 on the offensive line, 1 linebacker, 1 in the secondary as well. But defensively, this team looks excellent with the amount of talent that is coming back. So, I mean, NC State, this is a team that that backfield is going to be, once again, the one main concern. But otherwise, things look really good. Overall, so yeah, pretty great returning production. And that brings up the question, is this team a potential dark horse college football playoff contender in the 2022 season? And if you've seen some way too early rankings, most of the time NC State is in the top 15. I personally rank them at number 11 in my way too early rankings. And I think this is a football team that has got a very high ceiling going into next season. They were 9-3 last year, and I mean, this is a team that kind of surprised last season, you could say, considering they definitely had some inexperience last year. But that's a great sign. I mean, this team is returning quite a bit, and they're going to have even more experience going into next year. So, I mean, if you consider all of that, and Devin Leary's coming back as well, I mean, this is a team that has got definitely some potential to be a dark horse contender next season. I mean, in the ACC, it's wide open going into next year. I mean, usually, like, over the past decade, we've talked about how Clemson was, I mean, they have been the most dominant team in the ACC by far over the past decade, but 2021 was an exception. We saw a multitude of, like, 4 or 5 teams that were definitely quality teams in the ACC, and Clemson was kind of in the back there. And Clemson is, they're going to be better next year for sure. But I think NC State, Wake Forest, both those teams in particular really have got, especially NC State, has got a really for real chance of being a huge contender in the ACC, potentially winning a conference championship, and potentially, you never know, making it to the college football playoff as well. It's definitely not out of the question. So, this is a team to really keep an eye on, I think, going into next season. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season, and this team really hasn't been too active in the transfer portal. Those 5 players are the only 5 players that are involved with NC State in the portal this offseason. Max Fisher, receiver, was in NC State, but he's in the transfer portal. We don't know where he's going quite yet. Daryl Jones is coming in from Maryland, so that'll be a good addition to the depth of the receiving core. Khalid Martin is taken off as well. He's in the transfer portal as safety. Terrell Hawkins is going to South Carolina, defensive lineman, and Mario Love is going to North Carolina A&T, defensive back. So, but once again, otherwise, this team really hasn't been too terribly active in the transfer portal. Recruiting-wise, this team definitely could be better. They're ranked 63rd nationally, number 10 in the ACC. They got 2 4-star recruits and then 10 3-star recruits. So this team, recruiting-wise, definitely hasn't been great, that's for sure. But once again, just considering how this team is and the amount of experience here on this team and talent in general, I'm not too worried about the recruiting right now. I think this team is built to win in 2022, and that's the main thing that we're focusing on right now. But that's it. Let's look at your schedule now going into next season. You start off the season against East Carolina on the road. Then you got Charleston Southern at home, Texas Tech at home, UConn at home as well. And then for your October, you go to Clemson to start off your conference schedule. And then Florida State's at home, Syracuse on the road. You got Virginia Tech, Wake Forest both at home, Boston College as well, and Louisville and North Carolina to finish out the season. So kind of an interesting schedule. Your last home game of the season is in the 3rd to last week of the season. And of course you got, your main non-conference game that's you could consider a tough one will be against Texas Tech, which Texas Tech isn't a very good football team. They could make it to a bowl game next year, but you don't really have any challenging non-conference games, which could be a bit concerning if you want to make a run at the college football playoff. But then again, you do have tests against Clemson and Wake Forest, both teams that should be pretty good, and North Carolina against them on the road could be a tough one as well. But looking at your first 6 games here of the season, East Carolina, Charleston Southern, both easy wins. I do expect the Wolfpack to win both of those for sure. ECU, with it being on the road potentially, could be a challenging one. I don't know. ECU isn't a very good football team, though, so I'm not too concerned about that. But Texas Tech against a Big 12 opponent, I do want to favor the Wolfpack in that game right now, but Texas Tech definitely will, I would say, keep it close. Definitely an interesting matchup there. And then UConn, that's going to be an easy win as well. UConn's probably the worst team in the FBS. They shouldn't even be in the FBS. So that's going to be an easy win for sure there, I would hope. And then you got Clemson on the road. I'm going to favor the Tigers, actually, in that game. Clemson in that game. With it being on the road, I don't know. Clemson's got a pretty good home field advantage, and I do expect the Tigers to definitely improve going into next season. NC State and Clemson are my 2 big teams in the ACC that I'm really keeping an eye on. Wake Forest could be good, but NC State and Clemson in particular are the 2 teams that I'm really keeping an eye on in the ACC going into next season. So that's going to be a huge game, though, against Clemson. Very important one in October, but I'm going to go with Clemson to be the favorite right now. But once again, that's not me picking the Tigers outright right now. I'm just saying that I'm favoring Clemson as of right now. And once again, this is just a schedule preview, so I'll be predicting every game on this schedule, game by game, once we get to late spring, early summer. But for now, I'm going to favor the Tigers in that game, but I do favor NC State against Florida State. Florida State's also, that's a team that's just been such a big disappointment over the years, and so I definitely think NC State should be favored there. Second half of the schedule, Syracuse on the road. I'm going to say that's an easy win, but otherwise, the last 5 games are all going to be yellow games. So I'm going to favor NC State in all of their last 5. But definitely those games are going to be close. Wake Forest being a home game is going to help them out. I think Wake Forest is a little bit overrated going into next season. The energy in that program is great right now. They've got some good momentum going into next season, but they do lose a couple of key starters that I do think is a bit concerning. Then you got Virginia Tech. I'm going to say that's a close one as well. Boston College could be a decent team. And then Louisville, North Carolina, both on the road to finish out the season. North Carolina I'm a tad concerned about just because, North Carolina is kind of, they were a huge disappointment last year. I actually ranked them as the biggest disappointing team in college football of last season. I mean, many people expected them to be a college football playoff contender last year, and it turned out to be just a very mediocre team. So, but going into next season, North Carolina, I mean, they could be okay. With it being on the road, though, I'm going to keep it as a yellow game. But record prediction for NC State, 9-3 to 12-0. So I'm going to keep the range kind of wide for this team. I mean, this is a tough team to predict here because, I mean, this team could go undefeated. I really do think there's a possibility that we do see NC State go undefeated next year. I mean, this is a team that I mean, there's a lot of talent here and there's a lot of potential for sure. So, I mean, this team should get 10 wins at least next year. I mean, I would be very surprised if this team did get less than 10 wins. They've got so much talent here, and their schedule isn't incredibly tough either. So, I mean, NC State, this is a team that's got a high ceiling going into next season, and definitely they're a dark horse contender for the college football playoffs. So, but 9-3 to 12-0 is my record projection for right now. Kind of a wide range, but I do expect this team to be a big contender, at least in the ACC. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Wolfpack, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.